What's up, guys? You're my predictions for a UFC fight night happening in Busan, South Korea this Saturday. Super early card. I mean, we're talking about, for Eastern time in America, 5 a.m. for the main card. That means like 3 a.m. for the prelim. I mean, that's going to be a beast to watch, but I'm going to go through it, man. And any troopers are going to do the same thing. Let's fly in together, man. And hopefully I can get a breakdown out pretty soon after that. So it's gonna be a bit of a beast, but the people overseas in Australia and stuff like that, you guys got it really good. You know, it's time for Americans to suffer for these time slots now. But looking at this card, the card is actually pretty decent. There's some good talent, not even just from South Korea or even Asia in general. I mean, we got fighters like Surreal, Gahan, Alexander Rakic, Saeed Nurmagomedov, Raoni Barcelos. I mean, there's some really good talent and a lot of good fights on this card. And we're going to start with Surreal Gahan versus Tanner Bolster. Now, Surreal Gahan is probably the biggest heavyweight prospect today. Even though he only has 5 fights professionally, he has already displayed elite level striking and even super scary submission skills that completely surprised everybody. Out of his 5 wins, 3 of them are by submission, which is kind of crazy to think about. And he even submitted Pessoa, who on paper had a clear advantage in the grappling compared to Surreal Gahan, who's more of a kickboxer. And Tanner Bolster isn't really a grappler or a wrestler at all, or at least he doesn't use it in MMA. He really tries to strike with you, move in and out, uses athleticism, and he switches a lot, just as Surreal Gahan does. Right, Bolster will switch to southpaw and orthodox, but he doesn't do it as smoothly. It's kind of obvious when he switches after a combo, or when he's looking for an opening, you'll see him just switch and then look for it again. It's almost like he's trying to find another angle to find that opening, rather than, I see the opening, I'm going to switch and exploit it. Something that Surreal Gahan will do, which is a lot more tricky to deal with. And Bolster really doesn't have the knockout power, the speed, or even the athleticism that Surreal Gahan has. He likes to point fight, kind of, move in and out, land a lot of jabs, overhand, and move out. Very similar to almost like a Frankie Edgar in the stand-up, but he just doesn't have the wrestling to back it up. Surreal Gahan has everything across the board when it comes to striking over Tanner Bolster. Athleticism, strength, power, speed, technique, precision, timing, reach, fight IQ, and even, I believe, has a more dangerous submission game. So with this fight, I have to go right to Surreal Gahan. I think it will be his toughest fight to date because Bolster is extremely tough, really good chin, and he has a lot of experience. 17-5-1, has a lot of fights under his belt, but Surreal Gahan is very crafty in landing those straight shots right inside the guard, and his kicks are going to be a huge weapon against Bolster, especially the side kick to the knee, switching to opposite, and landing that power kick right to the ribs. So not too much of the technical aspect to go into this. I think just Surreal Gahan has a clear advantage when it comes to most areas in MMA. So I'm going to go Surreal Gahan. I can actually see a decision in this because Gahan won't chase a knockout or even a submission. He'll kind of just let it happen. So I'll go Surreal Gahan, I'll go decision, and it should be good experience for his future in the UFC. And now, right before I get into the next fight, I will say that Duho Choi versus Charles Jourdain, I wanted to cover that fight a little bit more, but there's just so many unknowns coming into that for Duho Choi. 2 years off because of military service. He got 2 beatings in a sense, 1 war and 1 beating in his last 2 fights. And he is a young guy, so there's a lot going into this that I just don't know how he's going to enter into this fight mentally. Maybe his head is not in the game because of the military service. I don't even know what will go on in this Duho Choi fight, but if he goes and competes like he used to, I believe he should be able to be a guy like Charles Jourdain, who is extremely vulnerable on the attack, and he attacks a lot, just in general. And Duho Choi, even though he's not the best counterpuncher, his straight right is still one of the most devastating weapons in this division. And the huge opening that Jourdain gives everybody, Duho Choi will be able to exploit that very quickly. So let's go to the next fight in Volkan Oezdemir versus Alexander Rakic. In my opinion, probably the best fight of this entire card. One of the most compelling and probably even the most competitive. A lot riding onto this where the prospect in Alexander Rakic, who is trying to get his way to a title shot, very promising, very dangerous, going up against the, I guess you would say, veteran in a way. He's been at the top of the division ever since he started in the UFC, and I'm literally meaning he fought Ovince St. Preux in his first fight, and in 365 days he got a title shot. Ever since, he's just been fighting the best of this division. So I guess you could kind of say he's a veteran. He's been through a lot that many fighters who have been in the UFC for 5 years have never even dealt with before. Now, both fighters are strikers for the most part, although Volkan Oezdemir, against some strikers such as Dominic Reyes, even Anthony Smith, although Smith has a good BJJ background, he'll go mix up the game and surprise them with takedowns. This is why you saw Dominic Reyes getting taken down throughout the entire fight. Reyes said that he did not expect Volkan to ever take him down, so it just completely threw him off of his game plan. It could possibly do a very similar thing to Alexander Rakic, but now people understand that Volkan can go the wrestling route. Volkan has always known to have not that great of wrestling, but he's been working on it consistently. But how will that do against Alexander Rakic? Well, Rakic did fight Devin Clark, who was a pretty good wrestler, and he stuffed his takedowns. Actually controlled Clark against the cage at one point very impressively. Got underhooks on him, controlling his posture, showing great strength and great positional awareness. That kind of surprised me, but it was up against the cage. This is something you do not want to do too much against Volkan Oezdemir, because Volkan has those punches on the inside that have unbelievably deceptive power. I have never seen someone who has deceptive power like Volkan Oezdemir, literally touching people into unconsciousness. I mean, what he did to Misha Serkinov and even Jimmy Manuwa is still insane to see. I mean, even his left hook on Ilir Latifi wasn't the most powerful or explosive left hook I've ever seen, but it dropped Latifi very badly. It just shows that Volkan has power that nobody can underestimate, and that's the thing for Rakic in this fight. He really has to accurately analyze that power in close range. He can never undermine it. If he's in the clinch, close exchanges, and he thinks that the punches of Volkan won't generate any power, he's going to be left surprised. So I believe this is going to force Alexander Rakic to stick on the outside and use his feet, which he does very well. From kicks to movement, he's very good at utilizing his legs, but his upper body doesn't move too much. He doesn't have too much head movement, and even doesn't cover up that much. He got dropped by Devin Clark because he was too late to pick his hand up. He was moving right on the cage, and Clark exploded into a left hook very quickly and dropped Rakic hard. This is something that Volkan can absolutely do against Rakic. He's going to be one pressuring, Rakic is going to be one moving back, and Volkan's going to look for those combinations from the outside, make his way on the inside, and work his dirty boxing, work his inside combination punching, and try to get Rakic out of there. But because Rakic doesn't have the textbook means of defending himself with his hands, he throws things that are very unpredictable, like the back fist he dropped Devin Clark with, right? I mean, he'll throw things out there because the orthodox style doesn't work. He will throw things out there that will completely surprise his opponents, especially a guy like Volkan Oezdemir, who in himself fights very textbook. But when you ever see him fight guys who throw things that are a bit wild or unorthodox, such as Daniel Cormier on the feet when Cormier was tagging him, Anthony Smith throws these very awkward long punches, Reyes' movement is something you don't see every day. That's when you really start to catch Volkan Oezdemir, and that is something absolutely Rakic does. Even from his right uppercut left head kick combo, they landed on Jimmy Manuwa was super impressive and super unpredictable. That is something Rakic never has shown before. Mixing up the head kicks with the punches that well, that smoothly, it only shows the development of Rakic, and that is something that I really am anticipating and looking forward to this fight. How much better did Rakic get? But my prediction for this fight, super tough fight to call. I really don't even want to pick a winner in this because it could really go either way. But if I have to choose one or the other, I will probably go Volkan Oezdemir because of his more orthodox style, and we have seen Rakic get put into danger because some of his lack of defense. And Volkan can also work with the takedowns to get his way closer to Rakic and work his way to the dirty boxing and stuff like that. So I'm going to go with Volkan Oezdemir, and I think he's actually going to win by a decision. I could see a stoppage, but I'm going to stick with the decision. I think he's going to win the first 2 rounds, and he's going to lose the third. I think Rakic is going to start picking up and seeing the openings of Volkan as the fight plays out. But because it's 3 rounds, I expect it will be a little bit too late for Rakic to land anything that will end the fight. And then we go to the main event. Frankie Edgar, aka all of a sudden Ben Askren's little big brother, versus the Korean Zombie. Now, as we all know, Frankie was supposed to make his 135 debut against Corey Sandhagen next month. But Brian Ortega pulled out of the Korean Zombie fight, so there was an opportunity for anybody to fight Korean Zombie, who is one of the top-ranked fighters of the featherweight division. Frankie stepped up, so did others like Kelvin Kattar, I believe, but they went to Frankie. I think they should have went to probably Kattar, because it makes a little bit more sense, and Edgar already had a fight lined up, so whatever, Frankie is always down to fight, that's why we respect him. But he's going to be at a huge disadvantage. Size disadvantage, time disadvantage, training disadvantage, age disadvantage, hometown disadvantage, power disadvantage. This fight is very much against Frankie Edgar, and he still has something to lose. He's 38 years old. He's a bit older than Korean Zombie. He doesn't have much time left in the sport. He wants to make that bantamweight run, but now it's going to be postponed most likely. And they were saying that he's going to go and fight Corey Sandhagen right after this. Nobody gets out of a Korean Zombie fight completely unscathed. Probably just Jose Aldo because of how that fight went. Korean Zombie didn't fight like his usual self because it probably was his first title shot. He tried to do things a little bit differently. It was a much slower paced fight, but usually when Korean Zombie goes zombie mode, nobody leaves that fight unscathed. And Frankie, who has a knuckle magnet on his face, gets bled up every single time and hurt almost every single fight. Yeah, you best believe Frankie's not going to leave this fight win or lose without something hurting. But looking at this fight, Frankie is probably the best fighter that could chain up punches with wrestling that Korean Zombie's ever fought in his entire career. There's only been one guy recently that Korean Zombie has fought with a similar style. That is Dennis Bermudez. Also similar build, but just a little bit bigger, more muscle bound. And when you go back and look at that fight, yes, Bermudez caught Korean Zombie here and there. He was landing a couple big shots, but you also have to take note that Korean Zombie was coming back off a 2-year layoff because of military service, and I believe shows some ring rust in that fight. But he did stuff 3 takedowns and eventually able to knock out Dennis Bermudez, countering Bermudez's jab, and Bermudez didn't really extend that much, which shows you how dangerous it is just to throw jabs at Korean Zombie. Right, the Hanato Macau knockout was vicious. It was silly. Slipping the jab, counter with the right overhand, and also evading the right straight of Hanato Macau with one movement. That is crazy. 2 punches dodged with 1 attack. And Frankie throws a lot of jabs, but they are to chain up things, especially the wrestling or even just boxing or even just to get his way in close. But here is the biggest issue with that. I understand jabs is always a good thing, whether the opponent is really good at countering them. It's just you have to set them up with different things. That's why the jab is the most versatile punching technique you can ever throw. There's a lot you can mix up with that. But Frankie seems to have been figured out a bit. And it's something I've been saying for a long time about Edgar. His setups are almost always the same. They're very identical. He always starts his combos from a very far range, which is a given. He's so short for the featherweight division. He's going to be much shorter than Korean Zombie, even though it says that Korean Zombie is 5'7", which is crazy. That's not right. Look at them stand next to each other. Korean Zombie looks like he's 5'9" at least. I'll give him 5'10", almost 5'11". But Frankie starts his combinations with either a jab or a short straight right, and they always miss. It's almost like what Holly Holm does, right? She throws 2 punches from the outside that don't land ever. They're just too far away to land, but it's almost like punching in the opponent's face to get them looking at that, and then you set up something afterward. That just doesn't work anymore, especially when people have seen it so many times. Brian Ortega caught Frankie Edgar for doing this with the elbow. Max Holloway kept Frankie on the outside for doing this the entire fight. Jose Aldo countered Frankie Edgar in that second fight constantly for this. They just don't let him get in. Either you're going to elbow him like Brian Ortega and create a wall and just meet him head on with power, because Frankie doesn't have that much power, especially compared to Korean Zombie here. Or you just keep your distance and just keep sticking on the outside and countering him, because Frankie, when he's throwing punches, he does leave his head open at times. Not his chin up, but his head open. But you'll say that Frankie Edgar moves his head a lot, right? You always see his head moving around. But his head movement isn't a reaction to anything. It's pretty much just moving your head so the opponent doesn't hit you, right? It's like, I'm going to keep moving my head so you can't hit me. But when you do that, you actually place targets and windows and show the opponent a pattern. This is why Frankie Edgar gets caught when he's moving his head. And that is something I believe that Korean Zombie is going to use to his advantage. He's going to find the counter on the jabs of Frankie Edgar. If not the jabs, just the setup in general. Throwing those short punches from the outside to make his way in. And Korean Zombie, I believe, is going to catch him with a right hand a few times in the fight, hurt Frankie Edgar early with it, and Frankie's going to have to find another means of getting successful in this fight. I think leg kicks are going to be one of the biggest weapons for Frankie, because Korean Zombie doesn't really check him that much, and Frankie will throw a lot of leg kicks. The cumulative damage can possibly affect Korean Zombie in this one, and the wrestling and shooting from the outside may be off one jab just to get something into Korean Zombie's face. But don't stick with the combinations and stick with that setup for too long. You need like one punch and get on those hips. Do not extend the combination, because Korean Zombie will make you pay for that. And I do believe Frankie will get Korean Zombie to the ground once, at least one time in the fight. How will go on the ground? I think Frankie is just overall a better grappler. I think he's a lot more responsible with position, whereas Korean Zombie will risk a lot. Very crafty, very dangerous with his submissions, from Darce chokes to twisters to rear naked chokes, whatever it is. Korean Zombie's very good at scrambling, but Frankie is a very hard guy to scramble with. But my prediction for this fight, I'm going to go with the Korean Zombie. I think Frankie has too many disadvantages coming to this fight on short notice, and I think his striking is going to be completely neutralized. I think the wrestling is going to be hard to commit with as the fight continues. I think early on he might be able to get on the hips of Korean Zombie, but I think Zombie's eventually going to be able to stuff him a little bit more and find the timing a little bit more, feel the strength of Frankie a little bit more, to the point where he's a lot more confident in going anywhere in MMA with Frankie Edgar. So I'm going to go with Korean Zombie. I'm going to go by 3rd round TKO. Even though it's very hard to see Frankie ever get TKO'd, he's a bit old, he's taking a lot of damage, short notice fight. Korean Zombie's going to be super motivated, super confident in this one. He looks in an amazing shape right now. Definitely taking it serious. He knows he's very close to a title shot. And I think we're going to see a very on-point Korean Zombie in this one. When we look at the betting odds here, I honestly agree with almost every single fight. The one I disagree the most with is the Jun Young Park versus Marc-Andre Barriault fight. I do think Park should be able to win that fight, even though experience-wise and when you look at the records, they are pretty close. But Barriault starts very strong, and then he just keeps exposing holes in his game, especially in the stand-up, and almost looks lackluster in the second round of every single fight. So I think Park should be able to take over the fight from the second round on. They do have Ryan Benoit as a very slight favorite. The thing that really speaks to me is he has literally been exchanging wins and losses since 2012. Win, lose, from 2012 all the way till now. And his last fight was in 2017 off a win. What that means is he's probably going to lose his next fight, right? And also the Rakic versus Uzdemir fight. They do have Rakic as a favorite. I can see that 100%. I can see Rakic winning. Very, very close fight. So I hope you guys enjoyed the predictions. And if you did, make sure to give it a thumbs up. If you enjoyed my content, make sure to subscribe. And make sure to be up with me early morning. I'll be tweeting as the fights go on. And hopefully it's a good card, man. Better be a good card. So I'll see you guys then.